Richard Crafts. Richard Crafts was a father of three. He was a pilot for Eastern Airlines and also a part-time policeman for the Newton, Connecticut Police Department. He was married for 12 years to a woman named Helly Crafts, a 39-year-old flight attendant for Pan Am. Richard was never home and constantly lied to his wife about his whereabouts. People that knew him described him as cold and having a cold stare when he looked at you. Friends of the couple said their relationship was not close and that sometimes Richard hit his wife. In November 1986, Richard's wife disappeared. The last time she was seen, she was dropped off at home by her best friend after a European work flight to Germany. When friends called about his missing wife, he told them she went to Denmark to visit her sick mother, but later changed his story to she was on vacation with a friend. The mixed stories caused her friends to contact one another and compare stories, which caused them to panic. When law enforcement gave him a polygraph test, he showed little reaction when answering questions, but tests showed no indications that he was lying. The story made front-page news around the world. Richard Crafts' face was everywhere. Frank Grimes even covered the story on A Current Affair. As a suspect, Richard maintained his innocence and claimed he didn't know where his wife was and that he did not kill her, and pointed out the fact that he passed a polygraph test. With Helly Crafts still missing and no leads on the case, investigators called the director of the Connecticut State Police Forensic Science Lab, Dr. Henry Lee, to accompany them to the Crafts' home. On the bed, Dr. Lee found 5 microscopic blood stains and a 6-inch blood smear that tested type O positive, the same as Helly Crafts' blood type. Analysis also showed it wasn't something like blood from her menstrual cycle, it was blood from a broken blood vessel. Impact tests showed the blood spatter hit the bed at medium speed and also at a 10-degree angle from a person leaning by the bed, all consistent with signs of a blunt force trauma injury. A orthotolidine chemical test also showed that the recently cleaned bathroom towels had been soaked in blood. During an interview, the Crafts nanny told a private investigator that right after Helly vanished, she saw what appeared to be a blood stain on the master bedroom floor, and that Richard replaced it with new carpet soon after, and that a freezer in the garage was missing. With no body, no weapon, and no witnesses, the police had nothing to go on. The only significant thing that they could think of that happened the week of Helly's disappearance was that it snowed outside that week. They then realized that a snowplow driver had reported seeing a man in an orange poncho on a bridge with a wood chipper around 3:30 a.m. Then he saw the same wood chipper on River Road an hour later, which was suspicious to him. The man led investigators to the area where the Housatonic River runs into Lake Zoar. There, near the riverbank among some wood chips, police discovered a piece of mail addressed to Helly Crafts. They also found a lot of blonde hair, blue fibers, and a gray piece of metal, what appeared to be tiny bone fragments, and a fingernail with red fingernail polish on it. When divers searched the water, they found a chainsaw that had been taken apart and the serial number had been scratched off. In the chainsaw blade, they found human hair, human tissue, and more blue fibers. After using a chemical to dissolve the top layer of metal on the serial number, they were able to recover the number. It was the same number on a warranty card filled out by Richard Crafts. After comparing hairs from the scene to hairs from a hairbrush owned by Helly, forensic scientists determined that the hairs were microscopically similar to Helly's hairs, and that the red fingernail polish matched red fingernail polish owned by Helly. To test if the bone fragments had been through a wood chipper, Dr. Lee used the same brand of wood chipper and a pig because they have skin and bones similar to humans. After the test, the pig bones had the same marks as the bone fragments from the scene. Tests on the fragments showed that they were human skull bones. With those results taken into account with the amount of bones found, scientists determined that a human was for sure dead. The gray piece of metal found was believed to be a crown to a tooth. After 5 more days of searching the scene, they also found a tooth. Dental records proved the tooth belonged to Helly. Richard's credit card records also showed that he rented a commercial wood chipper after his wife disappeared. At this point, based on the amount of forensic evidence collected, Richard Crafts was arrested and charged with the murder of his wife. Investigators believe the scenario that happened was, on November 18, 1986, Helly returned home from her flight to Germany around 7 p.m., put the kids to bed by 8 p.m. The nanny was off for the night and wasn't expected until midnight. They assume Helly got ready for bed, put on her blue nightshirt, looked through her mail, then put it in her pocket. While having a verbal argument with Richard, she leaned over the bed to change the sheets, and they think that's when Richard struck her in the head, causing bloodstains on the bed and carpet. He then put her body in a freezer in the garage, then tried to clean up the blood with the bathroom towels. When the nanny arrived to the home, she went straight to bed. In the morning, Richard took the nanny and his kids to his sister's house and told them that their mother had left the house early. He then used his credit card to rent a U-Haul and a commercial wood chipper. That night, he took Helly's frozen body to the river and dismembered it with his chainsaw and put the pieces of her body through the wood chipper along with some wood. Since her body was frozen, it left no blood at the scene, and most of the debris blew into the river. Only a few fragments landed on the riverbank, and the piece of mail in her nightshirt pocket passed through the chipper untouched. Before he left the scene, Richard took apart his chainsaw, scratched off the serial number, and threw the pieces into the river. Richard Crafts was convicted of murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison. It was the first time in Connecticut someone was convicted of murder without a body being found. Richard Crafts still maintains his innocence to this day. This was the first and only murder Richard was accused of, arrested for, tried, and convicted of. As far as anyone knows, this is the only murder he has ever committed.